Good day, Canada. Good evening, Asia. It is Thursday. It is 12 p.m. here in Toronto, and it is time for a regular webinar on immigration to Canada. Today, we'll be talking about farmers. All in all, I would say that immigration programs in Canada, which are designed to attract more farmers, gain their popularity. Agricultural sector is pretty much developed in Canada, and immigration through farmer could be a great opportunity for many applicants to get the status of self-employed candidates at the same time to start a profitable business on arrival to Canada. Currently, these immigration programs are available both at the provincial and at the federal level, having different requirements for candidates. And what we'll do today, we'll talk about immigration opportunities for farmers, for people who have experience in agriculture, for people who have experience in managing farms, and for those who are willing to come to Canada and work at a farm, and of course for those who are willing to come to Canada and open their own farm. So it's for both categories. So in this particular webinar, we'll try to catch both types of applicants. We'll try to cover as many programs applicable for you as possible. Now, some time ago, we've touched upon the self-employed immigration program and discussed how self-employed could benefit, uh, self-employed individuals could benefit from this program to immigrate to Canada. We mentioned there that there are two streams under this program. So one is for self-employed applicants who are engaged in cultural activities. We've discussed that in details in previous webinars. If for some odd reason you missed it, go to YouTube channel, check it out, and there I believe it's pretty self-explanatory. Now, the second stream is for farmers, and today it's time to discuss the second stream, of course. Let me briefly remind you about the most significant benefits of this program. So the question you might be asking is, of course, who's eligible? Okay, so any person who's been working in a designated occupation for self, not for the employer, could find him or herself eligible under the self-employed program. So self-employed farmers are specifically mentioned as eligible under the program, given that a candidate has recent relevant farm management experience of 2 years and more. One important thing about the program is that it does not require you to apply through the express entry system. It does not require you to wait for the invitation, and any eligible candidate could apply at any time. It's like the 2014-2013 Federal Skilled Worker Program. So you're eligible, you apply directly. No need to wait for an invitation. For farmers, all requirements with respect to the application process are pretty much the same as for self-employed, as general for the same self-employed category. The only major difference is that an eligible farmer must have at least 2 years of experience in farm ownership or farm management within the last 5 years. Of course, you may ask yourself, what are the language requirements of this program? Unbelievably, those requirements are rather low. This could sound impossible, but it's still the law. There is no minimum language requirement for the self-employed program. Instead, an applicant has to reach the pass mark based on the program points grid, and within the next couple of minutes, I'll get you to this topic and you'll see how easy to reach that pass mark. So, what does it mean to be a farmer within the scope of the federal immigration program for self-employed individuals? The immigration law gives a pretty clear answer to the question. Within the scope of this program, eligible self-employed farmer is an individual who has at least 2 one-year periods of experience in the management of a farm within the last 5 years on the date when the immigration application is submitted. In pretty simple words, it means that if you have managed a farm, not necessarily you owned a farm, but managed a farm for 2 years, or for 2 periods, 1 year each. So for example, you worked for as a manager of a farm for 1 year, and afterwards you went to another farm for whatever reason, and you worked there for 1 year or two, you would be eligible. Now, points grid. Okay, uh, it is a simple in 2002. The program is affordable for candidates from 21 to 49 years of age, not necessarily for young people of 35 and under. And general points for self-employed program looking like this one. A candidate could score 10 for his or her age, 25 for education, 24 for English or and French, 35 for work experience, and 6 for adaptability, which in this case could mean having relatives in Canada, or maybe you have had previous work or study experience in Canada, or maybe you got a spouse and your spouse got an education, or even you made an exploratory trip to Canada. All 5 of those factors give us an absolute maximum of 100 points. And the pass mark available for a farmer, it is, voila, 35. 35 out of 100. 35 is a score a candidate may reach only by having sufficient self-employment farming experience. Nothing else. Even with all the factors 0, let me just slide it back for a second. With the work experience, you can get the required 35. Of course, in real life, those things could be a little bit different. So I took the example from the previous webinar where we discussed the self-employed category, and here's what you could get. So if you're over 20, but you haven't turned 50, so you will get maximum for each 10 points. If you studied for at least 12, 13 years at school, like general, so you got a high school and maybe 1 year, you will receive 15 points for your education. If you took IELTS test, if it's around 4, 4.5, you will be given 8 points for language. If you meet very basic requirements for self-employed farming, just a minimum one, you would be getting 20 points for your work experience. And of course, cherry on the top, so say your spouse has completed a 1-year post-secondary program. I'm not talking about university, master's degree, whatever. Say he or she studied at a college just for 1 year after school. You would get 3 for adaptability. And in this case, your score in total for this program would be 56. With a pass mark of 35, that is way, way, way more than enough. Now, so what's the catch? Of course, to successfully immigrate under this program, a candidate has to demonstrate that he or she is able to and manage a farm in Canada. So it means that a candidate has to possess not only sufficient farming experience, but sufficient funds to establish a farm in Canada. Besides, a business plan would be required. However, each candidate is reviewed individually. There is no specific requirement for how much money you have to have. It should be a reasonable amount, but not necessarily hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. No. Apart from that, business plan, again, it's evaluated individually, right? If you're planning to open to Toronto, probably you would need at least $500,000 or maybe more. If you're planning to open a farm somewhere in Saskatchewan, well, in that case, I believe maybe $100,000, maybe less, would be more than enough for that, right? There is no such requirement. There is no requirement for down payment. There is no specific requirement for the business plan. Everything has to be reasonable. Let me again mention just some other pros. So the program, as I said, does not require any investment or to make any down payment. So All the funds, they stay in your pocket until you immigrate and eventually decide to open the farm. Of course, nobody would punish you if you don't do that upon arrival. Nobody would take your permanent residency back from you. But I mean, if you were planning to do that, why not? Now, there's no, of course, binding agreement to sign with the government of Canada. So you, as I said, you're absolutely free in making any decision about your future, about your occupation in Canada. Uh, if you establish a farm, good for you. If you don't, well, it's 100% legal for you to get a job or to work, to not to work, do whatever you want in Canada within the legal frame, of course. Now, last but not least, the program does not include a requirement to undertake any exploratory trips to Canada. So you might come to Canada to study business and see how the things are going here, but all in all, if you don't want to do that, there's no requirement for you to come for that exploratory trip. Now, going further for the provincial immigration programs for farmers. Many provinces, they have their own programs designed to facilitate farmers' immigration to Canada. Here are the requirements. I will just list the basic ones used in most of them. Financial requirement includes the amount of funds in the applicant's possessions. Naturally, if an applicant is expected to set up a farm in Canada, it's always a good idea to make sure that he or she has sufficient funds for this undertaking. Therefore, all the provincial immigration programs for farmers, they have these financial requirements. So right now we're talking about provincial programs in general. We'll proceed to facts and figures in just a couple of minutes, of course. Minimum investments. Usually it's required by an immigration program in the amount of funds an applicant has to invest in establishing a farm in Canada. An applicant may be required to sign an agreement binding him or her to comply with the certain requirements upon arrival to Canada in terms of establishing a farm, creating workplaces, and so on and so on. Security deposit, well, that's another payment that may be required by immigration officials. Its purpose is to guarantee that an applicant fulfills all the requirements of an immigration program and fulfills the agreement requirements. Since government has no legal way of revoking permanent residency of an applicant who fails to comply with such requirements, the government just keeps the security deposit, which is refunded. Some programs have a requirement that an applicant undertakes an exploratory visit to Canada. The purpose of the visit is to research farming opportunities and become well prepared for future processes. It is, of course, worth mentioning that if an applicant decides to immigrate under the program that requires him or her to undertake an exploratory visit, the fact does not necessarily guarantee visa issuance. If an applicant, of course, needs a visa. So an application for a temporary visa to Canada will have to be prepared independently with respect to all applicable requirements. From province to province, the application process under provincial immigration farmers could be different, of course. So for example, Manitoba requires that an applicant first submits an expression of interest, and often only afterwards an applicant is invited to apply, his or her immigration application would be accepted. In Saskatchewan, it works differently. The province does not have an expression of interest. Instead, it requires an applicant to complete application, include immigration forms for the provincial and federal immigration authorities, like at the same time, almost immediately. Uh, Today, we won't be discussing the application process, simply because it changes from time to time. We will discuss the particulars of the programs, like what are the requirements for them, so you get a sense of how it works for you. Now, let's start with the province of Alberta very quickly. Simply put, this immigration option is, I would say it's quite expensive, right? The minimum investment required is $500,000 Canadian. The provincial immigration authorities always reserve the right to require even more than that without the prior notice. As of today, Alberta does not really provide much information about this program. and it invites all the interested applicants to contact the authorities directly. Uh, I would say that this immigration pathway is for high-profile farmers. Okay, um, so just to give you a sense, in this program, you would have to have the valuable business plan. You have to have at least $500,000 of Canadian dollars of minimum investment, which you should be ready to use for opening a farm in Alberta if you're planning to undertake this program. The next in our list would be the province of Saskatchewan. In broad terms, it's on par with Alberta, but they provide a little bit more information on eligibility, of course. According to this program, an applicant has to have at least $500,000 of Canadian dollars in assets to qualify for the program. And the applicant has to be prepared to invest at least 125,000 Canadian dollars in a farm and business in Saskatchewan. So what it usually means that you would spend those money on opening a farm or buying an existing farm. Again, $500,000, you got them in your pocket, in bank accounts, in your assets, in property, whatever it is. At the same time, you have to have $125,000, which you should be ready to invest into either opening a farm or buying a significant portion of the farm to manage it. Security deposit would be required. Usually it's required at the stage where your application is approved by provincial authorities. This deposit is fully refundable in case an applicant meets all of the program requirements. So say you're coming to Saskatchewan, you got your permanent residency already, you invest $125,000 into buying a farm, you can get your $75,000 back. If you don't do that, you don't want to go to Saskatchewan, instead you're coming to Toronto and you just forget about it, well, $75,000 would not be refundable in that case. Plus, Saskatchewan has two mandatory requirements. To provide a business plan, well, not a big deal, but still it's required, and to conduct an exploratory trip to the province. Well, upon a conclusion of that exploratory visit, an applicant would be required to attend an interview with the program officer in order to support his or her business proposition and share the results of the trip. It's not really a difficult undertaking. What it simply means that you're coming to Saskatchewan, not just to have fun, but to explore opportunities in there. And at the end of your trip, you sit with the visa officer in, I would say, a rather friendly conversation. You discuss what you have seen, what you've experienced, how do you foresee your future business farming development in Saskatchewan? What were the questions left, etc., etc. So the officer gets an understanding that, look, you were not just having fun in the province, you were doing the tangible research. And last but not least, the farming experience required for Saskatchewan is 3 years. Now, Manitoba. The province of Manitoba has its own immigration program for farmers. In fact, just one second. It looks like, yep. Yeah, here we go. The slide disappeared for a few seconds. So the province of Manitoba has its own immigration program for farmers. In fact, it is very similar to the one of the province of Saskatchewan I just mentioned, with the difference that could be important for many applicants. The minimum required net worth, your net worth, is 350,000 Canadian dollars. Everything else is, I would say, basically the same. 125,000 Canadian has to be invested in farm and business, 75,000 deposit, which is fully refundable, and same requirement. Business plan, same requirement in terms of exploratory trip, and same requirement on farming experience of 3 years. Looks much better than Saskatchewan, simply because it does not require you to have that many assets. All you have to have is 300,000 Canadian dollars, which could be assets in property, could be your farm at home value, could be accumulated assets, which is more or less realistic here. Now, since we're talking about Manitoba, I would also like to draw your attention to a very specific program, the program which was designed for farm workers. All right, remember I promised that today we'll be talking not necessarily only about the farm owners, but for the farm workers as well. So this immigration stream under the Manitoba Provincial Nominee Program is called the Stream of the Community of Morden. What makes it so special is that it allows farm workers with their families and settle in the community of Morden. First, there's no specific requirement for the unique farming experience. It could be poultry farm, it could be experience working at any agricultural farm or anything you could imagine. There's no investment requirement. In this case, you're immigrating rather as a professional instead of immigrating as a farm owner. Language threshold. It's also pretty low. It's just about CLB 5, which is IELTS 5 to 4.5. And guess what? There are jobs in Morden awaiting for the newcomers. In fact, the whole program of the community of Morden has been designed around jobs and around the existing opportunities for newcomers. So in this particular program, it would be, of course, wrong to say that the job would be guaranteed, but I believe it would be right to say that under this program, there is a very, very, very high chance to find a job for yourself, for your family in the community of Morden, and not just successfully immigrate to Canada, but immigrate, find a job, settle your family successfully, and begin building your prosperous life in Canada. Here's the cherry on the top. Other occupations are welcomed under this program. So if you're a mechanic, if you have experience working at factories, welcome on board. We would be glad helping you to come to Morden and settle there. This program is not necessarily for farmers, but since we're talking about farmers today, I decided to mention it specifically. Now, to round up today's topic, let me draw your attention to the fact that today there are many more opportunities for farmers to immigrate to Canada than about a year ago. Federal immigration program for self-employed individuals, it looks quite appealing given its minimum requirement and eligibility criteria. The program is still officially open despite the fact that it's the only Canadian immigration program out there that does not require language testing, which is absolutely wonderful. Plus, the program of Morden. It is sort of a hidden treasure which could be your golden ticket to Canada. If you're a farm worker, not a farm owner, if you're the factory worker, if you're a mechanic, like mostly welcome. Let's look at your profile. Let's submit your expression of interest for Morden, and afterwards, that could be a pathway towards immigration. To add more, I would say that with the account to the recent elections that resulted in Liberals coming to rule in Canada, there are strong reasons to believe that we'll see many positive changes to major immigration programs quite soon. Therefore, today, I believe it's the right time for those of you who consider immigration to Canada to make a decision and to start the process. As always, just simply come to us. Let's discuss options available for you specifically. On the screen, you may see our contacts, contacts of our local team in Bangladesh, and of course, let me welcome you discussing your questions and have your profile assessed either by us directly or by our local team. Visa Center in Bangladesh is our local foothold, local trusted partners, and I'm not afraid to say that we are quite proud working with them. So come to us, Let us see it, let us discuss your case and see how we could help you and your family to immigrate to Canada. I'm grateful to all of you who left your comments before the webinar, shared the contacts, shared your profile. But let me be honest, guys, gals, it's not quite possible all the time within just looking at the few lines about you. I'm a mechanical engineer, or look, I'm a farmer, or I own a farm in India, in Bangladesh, anywhere. Would you please help me? It's not always possible to assess your profile just based on those mere facts. So come to us, let us talk, let us assess your profile properly. If you're from Asia, specifically from Bangladesh, like, welcome to discuss things with the visa center. Send them your profile, come to them directly, discuss your case. Self-employed, provincial programs for farm owners, program of more than all of them, those and even more would be available, and we will look at your profile to find the right solution which will fit. Now, our next conversation would be about students. We would talk about opportunities for those who wish to study in Canada, who wish to immigrate via provincial and federal programs. And what I'll try to do in the next webinar is to give you the idea of the scope of those programs, how to choose the right pathway towards the Canadian permanent residency if you're planning to come to Canada and study in here. On this point, thank you so much for being with me today. Really appreciate your attention, your comments. We will try to answer your questions one by one. And on this note, thanks a lot. Goodbye.